My daughter-in-law blackmailed me with her pregnancy to change my $10 million will. But when I found her notebook with detailed fraud plans, I sent her straight to prison and took custody of my grandson forever. I'm 57 years old. I own 15 restaurants on the East Coast, and what happened with my daughter-in-law Michelle basically showed me that there are people capable of anything when it comes to money. And when I say anything, I mean literally planning their entire life around scamming a family that welcomed them with open arms. This started like 2 years ago when my son Daniel met her, but the truth is her plan came from way before, as I discovered after this whole mess. I guess I should start from the beginning so you understand how we got to this point. I started washing dishes 30 years ago, the typical immigrant who arrives with nothing and breaks his back working. My wife, Linda, may she rest in peace, worked with me cleaning tables and doing whatever was necessary. Eventually we opened our first restaurant, then another, and well, things kept growing. It wasn't overnight. It was decades of working 12, 14 hours a day, of sacrificing vacations and weekends, of missing the kids' birthdays, because we had to be at the business. But we did it. We built something solid. And by the time all this happened, we had 15 establishments running. Well, making good money. I have 2 kids, Daniel, who's 31 years old and works selling pharmaceutical products, and my daughter, who's 28 and works in bank compliance. They both grew up watching how hard their mother and I worked. And the truth is, they're good kids, hard workers, with their lives together. Daniel met Michelle like 2.5 years ago, I think, on a dating app or something like that. She was 30 years old, 2 kids from a previous marriage, Sophie, who was 8, and Ethan, who was 10, and she worked as an administrative assistant at a real estate company. At first she seemed normal, nothing out of the ordinary. She was pretty, polite, the kids were well behaved. Daniel was excited. He'd been single for a while, after a relationship that didn't work out, and Michelle seemed stable, mature. The first few months everything was going well, or so it seemed. They'd come over for dinner on Sundays, the kids would play in the yard, normal family stuff. But looking back, I should have noticed it earlier. There were signs. Michelle always asked weird questions about the business, like, how much are the restaurants worth, if we had properties, how the company was structured. At first I thought she was just curious, wanting to get to know her boyfriend's family and understand what we did. But the questions kept coming, increasingly specific. She'd ask things like, if we had debts, how much we billed per month, if the restaurants were in a corporation's name or individual properties. It was strange, but Daniel was so in love that he didn't see anything weird. They got married like 2 years ago. A nice wedding at a hotel near the beach. We spent like $40,000 on that wedding. We paid for everything because Michelle said her parents couldn't contribute much. Linda and I were happy to do it. Daniel was our son, and we wanted him to have a special day. Michelle looked beautiful. Daniel was radiant. The kids were adorable as ring bearer and flower girl. Everything seemed perfect, One of those moments where you think your son found someone he's going to be happy with. The thing is that after the wedding, Michelle started getting more insistent about the money topic. She started suggesting that Daniel should be more involved in the family business, that he deserved a higher position, that he should have a percentage of the profits, which was ridiculous because Daniel had his own job, was doing well, and had never shown interest in managing restaurants. But Michelle wouldn't stop. She'd put ideas in his head that we were exploiting him, that we deserved to give him more because he was our son. Daniel started getting uncomfortable at family gatherings, like he felt he should ask for more or something. Then the worst happened. Linda started feeling sick like 8 months ago. At first we thought it was stress, tiredness, normal things when you've been working nonstop for 30 years. But the symptoms got worse fast. She went to the doctor and they diagnosed her with aggressive cancer, one of those that's already very advanced when they detect it. The doctor said they could try treatment, but the odds weren't good. Linda lasted 3 months. 3 horrible months, watching the woman I built my life with fade away little by little. It was devastating. I literally felt like they were ripping my heart out of my chest every day. During that time, Michelle acted weird. It's not that she was cold exactly, but there was something calculating in her behavior. She'd visit Linda in the hospital, bring her flowers and everything. But she'd always take advantage to ask me things about the will, about how the finances were organized, about what was going to happen with the business after. I was so destroyed that I barely processed those conversations. I just wanted Linda to be comfortable and not suffer. My daughter told me she thought it was weird that Michelle asked so much about inheritances while her mother-in-law was dying. But I told her that maybe she was just worried about Daniel, about how we were going to handle everything. Linda died 6 months ago. The funeral was horrible, one of the worst days of my life. The whole family was devastated. The restaurant employees were crying. It was a wake with like 300 people because Linda knew everyone. Michelle was there, consoling Daniel. But I saw her looking around, like evaluating who was present, who had money, what contacts she could make. It sounds paranoid, I know. But after everything that happened, those moments took on another meaning. A month after the funeral, I updated my will. It was something I had to do anyway. You know, because the previous will had Linda as the main beneficiary, and obviously that no longer applied. My lawyer helped me structure everything properly. I left most of the assets divided between my 2 biological children, Daniel and my daughter. I also created educational trusts of $50,000 each for Sophie and Ethan, Michelle's kids, because even though they weren't my blood, they were my son's stepchildren, and I wanted them to have opportunities. It seemed fair to me, generous even. I don't know how Michelle found out about the will's contents, because that information is supposed to be confidential, but somehow she did. Like 2 weeks after I updated it, she showed up at my house without Daniel. It was a Tuesday afternoon. I was working in my home office, reviewing supplier invoices. She rang the doorbell. I opened, thinking she was coming with the kids, but she was alone. She asked me if we could talk, said it was important. We sat in the living room, and that's when everything went to hell. Michelle started very calmly, saying she'd heard I updated my will, that she understood it was necessary after Linda's death. But then she completely changed tone. She told me it was unfair that her children received less than Daniel and my daughter, that they were all my grandchildren equally now that she was married to Daniel. I explained that Sophie and Ethan had $50,000 each in educational trusts, that was a considerable amount, that my biological children had been with me their whole lives and had worked to help build the family business. Michelle turned red. Literally, red, with rage. She told me that was discrimination, that I was being a bitter and classist old man, that her children deserved the same as mine. I tried to stay calm and explain that the will was my decision, that I'd consulted with lawyers, that I was being more than fair. Then she dropped the bomb. She told me she was pregnant, that I was going to have a biological grandchild, and that if I didn't change the will to include all her children equally, I'm going to make sure Daniel distanced himself from me, and that I'd never meet that baby. I froze. You know? I couldn't believe she was using a pregnancy as blackmail. I told her I was happy about the baby, that obviously I'd include them in my will when they were born, but that didn't change anything regarding the other kids. Michelle got up from the couch, pointed her finger at me, and literally said, "You're going to regret this. You're going to see what I can do." And she left, slamming the door so hard the pictures on the wall shook. I thought it was just a tantrum, that it would pass. But no. The next day, Michelle posted a huge post on Facebook telling her version of the story. She said, "I was a horrible grandfather who discriminated against her children, that Linda had barely died and I was already excluding my in-laws, that I was being cruel to innocent children." The post went viral among our acquaintances. I got like 30 messages from relatives and friends asking what was going on. Michelle had manipulated the whole story to look like the victim, completely omitting the fact that her children had trusts of $50,000 each. She started calling my siblings, my cousins, anyone who had my number, telling them I was being unfair, that Daniel was devastated, that she just wanted the best for her family. Some relatives called to scold me, without even asking for my side. It was horrible. I felt like I was losing control of my own life, of my own reputation. My daughter suggested I not confront Michelle publicly. That would only make things worse, but I was furious. Things got worse. I started noticing things were missing from my house. Small things at first, documents from my office, business papers. Then Linda's jewelry that I kept in a safe box in my closet. Michelle had a key to the house because Daniel had one, and obviously shared it with his wife. I told Daniel things were disappearing, and he got upset, told me I was paranoid, that Michelle would never do something like that I was just looking for excuses to attack her. It was my daughter who suggested installing security cameras. At first it seemed extreme to me, but she insisted. We installed cameras in the home office, in the living room, in the kitchen, all hidden or discreet. I didn't tell anyone, not even Daniel. And, well, it wasn't even a week before the cameras caught something. Michelle entered my house on a Wednesday afternoon when I was at one of the restaurants, supervising a renovation. She used her key, went straight to my office, and started searching through the file cabinets. The cameras recorded her scanning documents with her phone, photos of contracts, financial statements, property deeds. She was there for like 40 minutes, methodical, organized, like she knew exactly what to look for. It gave me chills watching those videos, seeing how someone who was supposed to be part of my family was stealing information from me. I showed the videos to my lawyer and he almost fell out of his chair. He told me this was serious, that we needed to act fast. I also showed the videos to Daniel, although I knew it was going to hurt. Daniel turned pale, watching his 5 months pregnant wife stealing documents from his father. He tried to defend her at first, saying maybe she was just looking for information to help him better understand the family business, but even he knew that was ridiculous. Then the bank thing happened. My daughter, who works in bank compliance, called me one day very upset. She told me they detected suspicious activity in accounts associated with my name. Apparently, someone had tried to open trust accounts using forged documents with my signature. The bank had blocked the transactions because something didn't add up in the documentation, but they'd been real fraud attempts. My daughter reviewed the documents and recognized some. They were copies of papers I had in my office, the same ones Michelle had scanned. Michelle had forged my signature, had created fake documents trying to transfer funds to accounts she controlled. She'd tried to create trusts in her children's names, but with her as administrator, basically trying to steal hundreds of thousands of dollars. The fraud was elaborate, almost professional, like it wasn't her first time doing it. That's when Daniel finally accepted something was very wrong. He started searching through Michelle's things, on her computer, in her personal documents. He found a notebook, a physical notebook where Michelle had everything planned. Page after page with schemes of how to approach wealthy families, how to gain their trust, how to identify valuable assets. There were notes about our family specifically, from before they got married. Things like restaurants worth between 3 to 5 million estimated, additional properties possible. Father seems sentimental and easy to manipulate. Daughter works at bank, could be problem. Daniel was devastated, literally crying while reading that notebook. He brought it to me, and we read it together. Michelle had planned everything from the beginning, from before meeting Daniel. She'd found him specifically because she knew his family had money. There were notes about how to fake interest in his hobbies, how to manage the kids so we'd like them, when to present the pregnancy as a negotiation tool. It was psychopathic. There's no other word to describe it. We hired a private investigator, and what he discovered was even worse. Michelle had done this before. Literally. Her first husband, Sophie and Ethan's father, had died in a car accident 5 years ago. His family had accused Michelle of trying to steal the inheritance, but in the end, they'd reached an out-of-court settlement to avoid a prolonged trial. After that, Michelle had moved to another state and tried the same thing with another family, but they discovered her before she could get married. Then she moved to our city and found Daniel. Everything suddenly made sense. All the weird behaviors, all the invasive questions, everything. Michelle was a professional scammer, a literal gold digger who made her living manipulating wealthy families, and we had completely fallen into her trap. Things exploded when we confronted Michelle with all the evidence. This was like 3 months ago. She was 5 months pregnant. Daniel told her he knew everything, showed her the notebook, told her about the bank fraud, about the videos. Michelle first denied everything, then started crying, saying we were misinterpreting things, that the notebook was from a novel she was writing, that the bank documents were a misunderstanding. When she saw we weren't believing her, she completely changed. She got violent, started screaming that she was going to destroy us, that she was going to take everything, that she knew people who could hurt us. She threatened to abort the baby just to hurt us emotionally. It was horrible. Seeing that transformation from sweet and polite Michelle to this person full of rage and malice. Daniel asked her to leave the house and she refused. We had to call the police. Michelle caused a huge scene, screaming that we were kicking her out pregnant, that we were monsters. The neighbors came out to see what was happening. The police had to physically remove her while she screamed threats. But Michelle didn't give up. A week later, she showed up drunk at my main restaurant, the first one I opened 30 years ago, the one with the most prestige. It was Friday night, the restaurant was full, and she came in stumbling, 5 months pregnant, screaming that I was a thief, that I'd stolen her money, that I was a horrible old man who discriminated against children. The customers were horrified. Some took out their phones to record. Michelle climbed on a table, literally, and started giving a speech about how rich families destroy working people, how I was an exploiter, completely delusional things. My manager tried to calm her down, and she threw a glass of wine in his face. I had to call the police again. When the officers arrived, Michelle tried to bribe them with money not to take her, which obviously only made things worse. They arrested her for disorderly conduct, attempting to bribe an officer, and being under the influence of alcohol while pregnant. Daniel was in shock. He couldn't believe the mother of his unborn child was behaving like this. I just wanted it all to end. I was emotionally exhausted, physically and mentally drained from so much drama. The legal team compiled all the evidence, the security camera videos, the notebook with the plans, the bank fraud documents, the private investigators' reports about her previous scams. Daniel filed divorce papers and requested emergency custody of the baby when it was born. The judge ordered Michelle to undergo psychiatric evaluation, which she initially refused to do until her lawyer explained she had no choice. The criminal charges were serious: fraud, forgery, identity theft, breaking and entering, illegal recording, various crimes. The district attorney said it was one of the most elaborate cases of family fraud he'd seen. Michelle potentially faced years in prison. The trial was a circus. Michelle tried to use the pregnancy to generate sympathy, showed up in court in very obvious loose dresses, crying at strategic moments. Her lawyer tried to argue she was emotionally unstable from the pregnancy, that hormones had made her irrational, all the typical excuses. But the evidence was overwhelming. There was too much proof, too much documented. Michelle gave birth while awaiting sentencing. A beautiful boy who weighed 7.5 pounds. Daniel was present at the birth, although things between them were destroyed. The baby was born healthy despite all the stress and Michelle's drinking incident. They put an ankle monitor on Michelle after the birth because she was a flight risk. They sentenced her to 18 months in prison, but with the possibility of parole after serving 90 days for good behavior. Also, 5 years probation, mandatory psychiatric treatment, and prohibition of unsupervised contact with us or our businesses. Daniel received primary custody of the baby. Michelle has supervised visits twice a week at a specialized center. The kids, Sophie and Ethan, stayed with their maternal grandmother, Michelle's mother, who lives in another state. She called us crying and apologizing when she found out about everything. She said she knew Michelle had problems, but never imagined it was this serious. We feel sorry for the kids. Honestly, it's not their fault to have a mother like that. Daniel is devastated but trying to move forward. He lives with the baby in a new apartment. I help him financially and with childcare when he works. My daughter also helps. Basically, we take turns caring for our grandson while Daniel tries to rebuild his life. The baby is almost 3 months old now, and he's beautiful, with Daniel's eyes and Linda's nose. It's bittersweet because Linda would have loved to meet him. The restaurants are fine, even better than before, surprisingly. All the drama generated publicity, bad at first, but people eventually understood. I was the victim, not the villain. Some customers even started frequenting the restaurants more as a show of solidarity, which was unexpected but appreciated. I kept the trusts for Sophie and Ethan because it's not their fault to have a criminal mother. If someday they want to go to college, that money will be there for them. Daniel says, I'm too nice. That after everything that happened, I don't owe them anything. But I don't know. I feel like someone has to give them a chance to have a better life than their mothers. Michelle served her 90 days and got out on parole like 2 weeks ago. She has to report to her parole officer every week, keep going to therapy, and she's supposedly looking for legitimate work. The visits with the baby are awkward, Daniel tells me. Michelle cries and apologizes, says she's going to change. The typical things people say when they face consequences. I honestly don't know if she can change. There are people who are just like that, manipulative, without real empathy. But that's not my problem anymore. My focus now is helping Daniel with the baby, keeping the restaurants running, and trying to rebuild some peace in my life after losing Linda and going through this nightmare. Last week, the baby laughed for the first time when Daniel made funny faces at him. We were at my house, the three of us alone, and that simple moment of joy after so much drama reminded me why it was worth fighting against Michelle. This is my real family, my son and my grandson, and no one's going to come destroy that with lies and manipulation. We've had enough of that for a lifetime.